Crosstalk with Sarah Cross, a place for radio wanderers to learn about the highest laws and other related topics, with the occasional stroll through more relaxed notions. Every Wednesday, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Crosstalk with Sarah Cross, Studio A on Revolution Radio.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in.
All right, Mackie, you in the studio?
Here I am.
There you go.
Hello.
All right.
And welcome back. I forgot to unmute myself. To Dave and Mackie's Shiny Side Out, show number 469?
649.
649, that's what I said. Clearly. You must have misheard me. No, look, this is Listener Funded Radio, so if you can donate, please do. Very important. If you can't, that's okay. Tell people about the station. This is the second hour for a 2-hour show where we talk about the monolithic builders. And make no mistake, they are all over the planet. They're all over the planet. This is really the important thing here to understand. These are not stories of Stonehenge or some Incan walls, right? Or maybe some blocks in the East Islands. This now has become a globally spanning phenomenon as we find more and more information. Some of it disregarded by science, or in academia, I should say, because it doesn't fit the model. That might change in the coming years, like many other things have changed since we've started this show. And one of the key things that has changed since we started the show, that's something I said right from the start, 12, 13 years ago. The time for the evolutionary time scale of human beings will be pushed back further and further into the past, as will our civilizational start points. And both things have happened. We have been pushed further and further back in time from a point of view of, well, how old is the human race actually? What can we say? I mean, really as modern humans, right? And since the discovery of, but not only, Göbekli Tepe, officially recognized as something, the other sites, one is certainly in Indonesia, the other one is in the Pacific, non-Madul, that haven't been recognized as being something older than what mainstream says, but Göbekli Tepe has, and it broke our understanding of how the history of the world actually unfolded. There will be more if we are given that opportunity, that is, and we will also understand that the age of us is a lot older than what science has allowed for. We are a lot older as a species than science would have us be. Okay, that's just how it is. This is the truth, right? And then we'll get to that in due course. Trying to find the page we're on.
East Asia Northern Style.
East Asia Northern Style. That's what I thought. Middle Eastern megaliths.
I've got a page
Southeast.
43.
43. Yeah, that's right. Here we go. South Asia, Southeast Asia. Tell you what, you start reading, and I'll find it, right?
It's after the title Asian Megaliths, and it's East Asia Northern Style.
There you go.
Northeastern Asian megalithic traditions originated in northeast China, in particular the Liao River Basin. The practice of erecting megalithic burials spread quickly from the Liao River basin and into the Korean peninsula, where the structure of megaliths is geographically and chronologically distinct. The earliest megalithic burials are called northern or tablet style because they feature an above-ground burial chamber formed by heavy stone slabs that form a rectangular cyst. An oversized capstone is placed over the stone slab burial chamber, giving the appearance of a tabletop. These megalithic burials date to the early part of the Mumun pottery period, which is approximately 1500 to 850 BC, and are distributed, with a few exceptions, north of the Han River. Few northern style megaliths in northeast China contained grave goods such as Liaoning bronze daggers, or Liaoning bronze daggers, prompting some archaeologists to interpret the burials as the graves of chiefs or preeminent individuals. However, whether a result of grave robbery or intentional mortuary behaviour, most northern megaliths contain no grave goods. Meki.
Southern style. Southern style megalithic burials are distributed in the southern Korean peninsula. It is thought that most of them date to the latter part of the early Mumun or the middle Mumun period. Southern style megaliths are typically smaller in scale than northern megaliths. The interment area of southern megaliths has an underground burial chamber made of earth or lined with thin stone slabs. A massive capstone is placed over the interment area and is supported by smaller propping stones. Most of the megalithic burials of the Korean peninsula are of the southern type. As with northern megaliths, southern examples contain few, if any, artifacts. However, a small number of megalithic burials contain fine, red burnished pottery, bronze daggers, polished groundstone daggers, and greenstone ornaments. Southern megalithic burials are often found in groups spread on lines that are parallel with the direction of streams. Megalithic cemeteries containing burials that are linked together by low stone platforms made from large river cobbles. Broken red burnished pottery and charred wood found on these platforms has led archaeologists to hypothesize that these platforms were sometimes used for ceremonies and rituals. The capstones of many southern megaliths have cup marks carvings. A small number of capstones have human and dagger representations.
The capstone style. These megaliths are distinguished from other types by the presence of a burial shaft, sometimes up to 4 meters in depth, which is lined with large cobbles. A large capstone is placed over the burial shaft without propping stones. Capstone style megaliths are the most monumental type in the Korean peninsula, and they are primarily distributed near or on the south coast of Korea. It seems that most of these burials date to the latter part of the middle Mumun, which is 700 to 550 BC, and they may have been built into the early part of the late Mumun. An example is found near modern Changwon or Changwon at Dio Chekcheon Ni. It's not the knights that say ni, I presume. Ni! Where a small cemetery contained a capstone burial, number 1, with a massive rectangular shaped stone and earthen platform. Archaeologists were not able to recover the entire feature, but the low platform was at least 56 by 18 meters in size.
That's pretty big.
What?
That's pretty
That's
big.
crazy.
Now, before we go into Southeast Asia, which is why I was mistakenly earlier, These are very similar to all the megalithic, I guess, dolmens and menhirs and burial sites or other such things you find all over the rest of the world. Now, the thing is this. Could you argue that this is just the most natural way of doing things? You know, you just have these big stone monuments, you know, that are sort of, you know, look like, I guess, like a shelter in a way, with, you know, with supporting struts and a fairly large monolith on top. I don't know. And the thing is, why would it be so pervasive all over the world? I mean, other cultures used to burn their dead.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
The Vikings.
Or bury them in the ground.
Yeah.
The Vikings certainly did that, yes. Others, again, especially in North America, put them on raised platforms of wood and let the elements have at it. Right? So it's really telling, to me at least, that you find so many similar structures built in very similar ways all over the world. And I don't know how you can say that they're not connected, because clearly something must have connected the builders of this. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The travel, I think we already know that travel in the olden days, well before history starts for us, was a lot more extensive than we had ever believed. They found cocaine in mummies. Okay? Traces of tobacco as well. There's no cocaine or tobacco found in Africa or Europe.
Oh, they'd been to South America for sure.
100%. They just didn't claim it as having been discovered. They just traded. They were traders, right? Mm-hmm. Same with Asia. Asia, for sure, Asia would have traded with Australia. Now, I will give you that the Pacific is quite something to cross, but, and this is really important, and this is something that Graham Hancock outlined in his latest series on Netflix, I think. The DNA that was found in South America was similar to the DNA that was found in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, however, this is important. That DNA wasn't found anywhere along the Bering Strait route. It was only found in South America. So, somebody did cross the Pacific didn't go by the way of the Bering Strait. Okay, down into North America and then out into South America, etc. They were just went across the Pacific. So that happened. Stand on your head if you don't like it. It happened. Mm-hmm. And trade elsewhere. I mean, we know that the Arab traders were prolific. The traders in Indonesia. I mean, they're Muslims. They didn't become Muslims by themselves. You know, that was brought there. I mean, the trading routes predate Islam. Okay, the Silk Road predates many other religions. Certainly Islam. I mean, the Silk Road was there before Islam. The Silk Road was there before Christianity. So these are really ancient trade routes. And how ancient? Well, who knows, right? We find Chinese coins and Chinese artifacts in England of a very ancient provenance. Just wanted to say that I think we have to change our view of the ancient past and give our ancestors a little more credit than they're currently given. Which brings us to Southeast Asia, living megalith culture of Indonesia. The Indonesian archipelago is the host of Austronesian megalith cultures, both past and present. Living megalith cultures can be found on Nias, an isolated island off the western coast of North Sumatra, and bear in mind there are thousands of islands there. The Batak people in the interior of North Sumatra, on Sumba Island in East Nusa Tenggara, and also Toraja people from the interior of South Sulawesi. These megalith cultures remain preserved, isolated, and undisturbed well into the late 19th century. Several megalith sites and structures are also found across Indonesia. Menhirs, dolmens, stone tables, and ancestral stone statues were discovered in various sites in Java, Sumatra, Sulawesi, and the Lesser Sunday Islands. Again, menhirs, dolmens, stone tables, the same thing we find in Europe. It's pretty far away, eh?
Yeah,
in South Asia, Dave? Yep.
Yes. So megaliths in South Asia are dated before 3000 BC, with the recent findings dating back to 5000 BC in southern India. Megaliths are found in almost all parts of South Asia. There is also a broad time evolution with the megaliths in central India and the upper Indus Valley, where the oldest megaliths are found, while those in the east are of much later date. A large fraction of these are a large fraction. Ha! Oh, I love that. A large small piece of these are assumed to be associated with burial or post-burial rituals, including memorials for those whose remains may or may not be available. The case example is that of Brahmagiri, which was excavated by Wheeler in 1975 and helped establish the culture sequence in South Indian prehistory. However, there is another distinct class of megaliths that do not seem to be associated with burials. In South Asia, megaliths of all kinds are noted. These vary from menhirs, rock-cut burial, chamber tomb, dolmens, stone alignment, stone circles, and anthropomorphic figures. These are broadly classified into two potentially overlapping classes after Maurity, 1994-2008, and Sepulchral, containing remains of the dead, or memorial stones where mortal remains along with funerary objects are placed, and non-sepulchral, including large patterned placement of stones over a wide area. The non-sepulchral or trowel type is associated with astronomy and cosmology in South Asia and in other parts of the world, the Menon or Vahaya, so this is 2010. In the context of prehistoric anthropomorphic figures in India, around 1988, 1999, up into Singh 2008, this is references. Note that it is unclear what these giant anthropomorphs symbolize. They usually occur in association with megalithic monuments and are located in megalithic burial grounds and may have been connected with ancestor worship.
I wonder if we can find similarities, especially in those structures in the way they were built, and what stars or whatever they might have been laid out to resemble or follow, because that would strengthen the interconnectedness, of course, of all of these sites, and it's certainly a cultural kind of connection there. Which brings us to the Melanesian megaliths. Megaliths occur in many parts of Melanesia, mainly in Milne Bay province in Fiji and Vanuatu. Few excavations have been made, and little is known about the structures. The megalith tomb Otuyam at Kirivina has been dated to approximately 2,000 years old, which indicates that megaliths are an old custom in Melanesia. However, very few megaliths have been dated. The constructions have been used for different rituals, so we believe, I should say. For example, tomb sacrifices and rituals of festivity. Dance rites exist next to some megaliths. In some places in Melanesia, rituals are continuing to be held at the sacred megalith sites. The fact that the beliefs are alive is the reason that most excavations have been stopped at the sites.
Micronesian megaliths. So the megalithic structures in Micronesia reached their most developed form on the islands of Pohnpei and Cosray in the eastern Caroline Islands. On these two islands, there was extensive use of prismatic basalt columns to build upland building complexes, such as those at Salapok on Pohnpei and Menka on Cosray. These building sites, remote from the ocean, appear to have been abandoned early. megalithic building then shifted to constructing networks of artificial islands on the coast that supported a multitude of common royal and religious structures. Dating of these structures is difficult, but the complex at Nan Madol on Pompeii was probably inhabited as early as 800. What's CA?
Common era. Should be CE.
Yeah. Probably as an artificial island with the more elaborate buildings and religious structures added to the site from 1000 to 1400 AD.
There's a different view on the Nan Madol Micronesia, which I think is important to present here as well. If you ask to many archaeologists what the greatest archaeological mystery on Earth is, 99% of them will answer the city of Nan Madol in Micronesia. I don't know if that is an accurate description of the situation. The mysteries surrounding the city are so great and incomprehensible that virtually no one wants to talk about them. If you go to Wikipedia, you will read, which we just did, that the city of Nan Madol was built around 1200 AD by the Sodelur. But this data only refers to the only known population that has been traced on the island, using some available dating systems. But in reality, according to the archaeologists themselves, the history of Nan Madol must necessarily have been quite different, although no one can precisely explain how. What makes the city so mysterious, or rather impossible? Some of the mighty walls of Nan Madol were built from below the sea level. It should be noted that columnar basalt blocks were used, at least in some cases weighing up to 50 tons. These are held together without adhesives, simply by their weight. They are arranged on top of each other in a crisscross pattern, like Lego. Researchers have noticed that the care with which these blocks are placed underwater is the same as when they are placed out of the water. The whole thing is extremely precise. How is it possible to build huge walls that start from below sea level and then emerge from the water? Nan Madol is 1.5 kilometers long. It was a real metropolis for those times. So why is it difficult to accept this theory, which is so logical as to seem obvious? If this were true, it would mean that Nan Madol was built before the waters of planet Earth rose due to the thaw. We're talking about a period between 14,500 and 7,000 years ago. This would make Nan Madol, excuse me, by far, oh my goodness, one second. And we would pick by far the oldest city in the world. It would also prove the existence of a civilization that existed before the last deglaciation. The ruined city is one of today's great archaeological enigmas and is sometimes called Atlantis, the eighth wonder of the world, or the Venice of the Pacific. And I should maybe point out here that almost all archaeologists agree that the canals that appear now in Nan Madol between the various platforms and so forth were in fact quite obviously on dry ground when they were built. So there was no canal. So Venice of the Pacific is the wrong description, because it was never meant to have these waterways between platforms and buildings. So that's probably something we need to explain here as well, Dave.
Well, it's funny, I don't have that text in my show notes, but that's all right. The next one I go to is Baalbek.
Yeah, that's it. That's the next one.
Well, see, the bit you just read out, I don't even have.
I'll send you my clearly at some point updated show notes.
I understand, but that's okay. You know, what do you?
It worked out well.
It did. It did perfectly well. Emperor Wilhelm II of Germany, this is in regards to Baalbek excavations, and his wife passed through Baalbek on November 1st, 1898. Oh, those were good days back then, Maggie. On his way to Jerusalem, he noted both the magnificence of the Roman remains and the drab condition of the modern settlement. It was expected at the time that natural disasters, winter frosts, and the raiding of building materials by the city's residents would shortly ruin the remaining ruins. The archaeological team he dispatched began work within a month, despite finding nothing they could date prior to Baalbek's Roman occupation. Poochstein and his associates worked until 1904 and produced a meticulously researched and thoroughly illustrated series of volumes, or as my friend used to say, volume. Later excavations under the Roman flagstones in the Great Court unearthed 3 skeletons and a fragment of Persian pottery dated to the 6th to the 4th centuries BC. The sherd featured cuneiform letters. In 1977, Jean-Pierre Adam made a brief study suggesting most of the large blocks could have been moved on rollers with machines using capstans and pulley blocks, a process which he theorized could use 512 workers to move a 557 ton or 614 tons block. Baalbek, with its colossal structures, is one of the finest examples of Imperial Roman architecture at its apogee. UNESCO reported in making Baalbek a World Heritage Site in 1984. When the committee inscribed the site, it expressed the wish that the protected area include the entire town within the Arab walls, as well as the southwestern extramural quarter between Bastan al-Khan, the Roman site, and the Mameluke Mosque of Ras al-Ain. Lebanon's representatives gave assurance that the committee's wish would be honoured. Recently, cleaning operations at the Temple of Jupiter discovered the deep trench at its edge, whose study pushed back the date of Tel Baalbek's settlement to the PPNB Neolithic. Do you know what that stands for, Mackie?
It's the Neo Bronze Age. It's the Neolithic is the New Stone Age.
Mm-hmm.
So several thousand years into the past.
Well, clearly before the Romans.
Just a little.
Just a tad. Finds included pottery shards, including a spout dating to the early Bronze Age. In the summer of 2014, a team from the German Archaeological Institute, led by Janine Abdul Masih of the Lebanese University, discovered a 6th, much larger stone suggested to be the world's largest ancient block. The stone was found underneath and next to the stone of the pregnant woman. That's Hajar Hibla, and measures around 16.9 meters by 6 by 5.5 meters. Or if you're into feet, it's 64 by 20 by 18 feet. It is estimated to weigh 1,650 tons, or 1,820 tons, Mackie.
Just a quick one to fill in the gap from earlier. The PPNB, which is, the pre-pottery Neolithic period B, is part of the pre-pottery Neolithic. And it's a Neolithic culture centered in Upper Mesopotamia, which is where we are, in the Levant, dating to 10,800 to 8,500 years ago.
Yeah, well, they didn't have pottery, but they could move some big stones, right?
Must
have been the case.
That is 8,800 to 6,500 BC.
Mm-hmm.
It was typed by British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon during her archaeological excavations at Jericho in the West Bank territory of Palestine. So this is right. Where is it? Yes. It's right toward the end of the Younger Dryas. That's where we are here with this. Okay, just so we're all clear. This has been pushed right back now. Now, there's another article by April Holloway. The largest known megalithic block from antiquity revealed at Baalbek. Now, I want to I don't want to dispute it, but
But
the I guess the one, it wasn't a block. I mean, it was quarried, but it was never fully excavated. This was at the Chinese stone quarry we discussed last week. I maintain that's probably still the largest that we ever attempted to excavate. But let's see what she has to say to us. A new analysis conducted by the German Archaeological Institute at the ancient stone quarry of Baalbek, ancient Heliopolis in Lebanon, has calculated the size and weight of an enormous monolith and can now conclude that it is the largest known stone block ever carved by human hands. Located at an altitude of approximately 1,170 meters in the Bekaa Valley in Baalbek, Baalbek is known to have been settled from at least 7,000 BC. Remember, we just established that?
yeah,
With the pre-pottery Neolithic B? Okay, good. So we're consistent here. With almost continual settlement of the Tell under the Temple of Jupiter, which was a temple since the pre-Hellenistic era. So not only was it a temple well before Roman times, it was a temple well before Greek times, right?
mm-hmm.
However, and credit here to Miss Holloway, some researchers, such as Graham Hancock, argue that its roots go back as many as 12,000 years. Now, not to split hairs, but if you've already pushed it back to 7,000 BC, which makes it 9,000 years before now, 9,000 years, and now we're saying, we think it might actually be 12,000 years before now. I'd be going, okay, well, that's not a massive stretch, is it? Anyway.
Not really.
During the period of Roman rule, Baalbek was known as Heliopolis, which is, of course, City of the Sun, and housed one of the largest and grandest sanctuaries in the empire. Now, we discussed this in a previous article that we shared with you. This is in the middle of nowhere. It was back then, and it still is, but it has one of the largest cemeteries in the world, of the ancient world. Okay, it was for some reason it was a very holy place, clearly, and the Romans felt compelled to build one of the grandest and largest sanctuaries in the empires at that particular site. And I think they did that because the platform already existed. They thought, my God, look at this platform. That's just astounding.
Sitting there,
and clearly
unused,
the local
rotting
people.
away. Yep.
That's it. And the local people were in awe of it, so we just put the Roman stamp on it. Thank you very much, because that's what the Romans did. One of the most awe-inspiring features of Baalbek are the incredible megalithic foundations of the Temple of Jupiter. The temple was built on a platform of stones that are among the largest building blocks seen in the whole world. 27 of these enormous limestone blocks can be seen at its base, with 3 of them weighing about 1,000 tons each, and they're known as the trilithon, as you all know, of course, by now. How they were cut so finely and moved into place has defied explanation, particularly considering the blocks are known to have weighed over 1,000 tons. Many researchers, Graham Hancock included, reject the traditional explanation that the blocks are the work of the Romans. Indeed, a quick glance at the photograph below, and we shared this with you before, clearly shows the difference in style and appearance between the large megalithic stones and the surrounding blocks used to build the temple. The weathering is also much more pronounced on those large stones. Now, this is what Graham Hancock writes. I do not agree with the mainstream archaeological view that any of the 3 megalithic blocks in the quarry or the enigmatic megalithic foundations of the Temple of the Jupiter are the work of the Romans. I believe these huge megaliths long predate the construction of the Temple of Jupiter and are likely to be 12,000 or more years old. Contemporaneous with the megalithic site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, in fact. I suggest we are looking at the handiwork of the survivors of a lost civilization that the Romans built their Temple of Jupiter on a pre-existing 12,000-year-old megalithic foundation.
Isn't that the truth? Right there. Sure. I've shown the photograph, Mickey.
Oh, thanks. Dude.
Yeah.
That's a little, by the way, in the left-hand corner, that's a person.
Crazy,
that's
right?
a dude.
Yeah. So, and that photo, was from the 1890s, Mackie.
Yeah, I know.
I'm just gonna put it back on screen again so people get an
please
idea.
do.
All right. So the gigantic blocks used in the foundations of the Temple of Jupiter are known to have come from a nearby quarry located 800 meters or 2,600 feet from the temple. The limestone quarry houses two massive building blocks that never made it to the temple, one weighing 1,240 tons and the other known as the Hajar al-Habla, or the stone of the pregnant woman, weighs about 1,000 tons. Archaeologists believe that Hajar al-Hibla monolith was left in the quarry because the stone quality of a block's edge proved to be poor and the monolith could easily be damaged during transport. Just changing the screen. There we go. According to Discovery News, the German archaeological team have now found a third building block next to the Hajar al-Hibla stone and underneath it. Still partially buried, the monolith measures 19 meters or 64 feet by 6 and at least 5.5 meters in height. Its width has been estimated at 1,600. Its weight, has been estimated at 1,650 tons, making it the largest known stone block from antiquity. The level of smoothness indicate the block was meant to be transported and used without being cut. The German Archaeological Institute said in a statement, further excavations will attempt to establish whether the newly discovered block suffered from the same problem as the Hajar al-Hibla stone, resulting in its abandonment in the quarry. Now, just a quick aside here about stones left in the quarry. Were we there? No. Do we have any audio from it? No. Is there any transcripts of why the stones were left there? No. There was nothing. Around the same period of time, give it 1,000 years, there, as estimations of different dating periods of megalithic building all around the world, there seems to be a large tools down event. Something happened in which they didn't complete their tasks. That's to be noted at this point in the show cycle. And it's not isolated to just the Jupiter Temple, for instance. And now back to you in the studio, Mackie.
That's a good point. Not only that, but this new stone here would have weighed more than the other stones at 1,600 tons. And we shared with you guys last time just how limited we are today and what kind of cranes it would take to lift these kinds of loads. The only cranes that could lift these kinds of loads are stationary cranes you see at harbors, large ports like Rotterdam or Singapore or Hong Kong or something like that. And they're designed to be stationary more or less and move the loads along a sort of a track of pulleys and ropes. But the structure that supports it is across acres of real estate, right? So we get an idea of how big these cranes are. So this would have been, for us today, an enormous undertaking and enormously expensive in resources as well as money, right? So not an easy thing. Which brings us to the question of who were the ancient megalithic builders. And something that we need to do before we start the article here, which is by above top secret, if you ever wanted to look it up yourself. Going back a few tens of thousands of years, maybe not even that long, looking at some of the more recent evidence, the human race was a lot more diverse than it is today. Right? Neanderthal is not our ancestor, Neanderthal is our cousin. Denisovan, our cousin. Couple others, probably another two or three species that we haven't fully identified yet of humans interbred with us as well. And then there's, of course, Homo forensis, which is, affectionately called the hobbit, that was found in Indonesia. So there are a lot of human races that no longer exist. And I want to say human races because we interbred, because they form part of our DNA. Okay? So DNA evidence here is supporting the fact that we were much more varied going back thousands of years than we are today. And if you look around today, the human race seems to be extremely varied. Asian and African and Caucasian and Indian, etc., etc. But it would have been even more so, if you can believe it, much more so, in fact, than what we have today. Now, this article is a reinterpretation of known historical, archaeological, as well as genetic facts. This is the first time in human history that we now have the science and technology to begin to fully explore this area through the use of the sciences such as genetic DNA mapping, archaeology, and geology, and many others. However, sometimes those sciences come into conflict with each other's findings, such as the argument of the age of the Sphinx between some geologists and Egyptologists, as we've discussed ad nauseum on the show. Our true history is infinitely more complex and interesting than many would like to give it credit for. There were literally millions and millions who were born, lived, and died before recorded history. This journey will be very intriguing to some, while others will consider nothing more than one man's imaginative version of events. A period in time where there were people living along and migrating through those now submerged Ice Age coastlines. If, as it is presently accepted, that modern man had interbred with Neanderthal and Denisovans, wouldn't there have been a crossover period producing half-breed hybrid species, one which would have had possibly physical characteristics and mental attributes of both? Not to say that it would have been a super species, but something not quite us and not quite them. Also, depending on where they lived, they could have had varying physical characteristics and mental attributes of varying degrees. In other words, not all would have looked or acted the same, and certainly not the way we do today. Dave? Some groups?
Yeah, some groups may have had an increase in strength from our Neanderthal Denisovan lineage, coupled with a greater mental capacity of Homo sapien. When could this have possibly happened? What would have been their abilities? If a skeleton is found which appears to be more Neanderthal-ish or Neanderthal-ish, then it is classified as either being an early or late Neanderthal. However, if it is closer in appearance to modern humans, then it is classified as either being an early or late Homo sapien. No further explanation is generally given. Before some jump in and ruin my bowl of Cheerios, they'll first have to admit that the majority of the time no DNA is taken, even if it's capable of being able to be taken, which could prove the skeleton is actually closer to one group or the other, genetically speaking. The fact that a large percentage of modern man, all those of non-sub-Saharan African and some Australian Aboriginal descent, carry within their genetic makeup either Neanderthal or Denisovan DNA. Now, these two lines left Africa hundreds of thousands of years ago, prior to Homo sapiens' journey. Let's look at some of the major differences between the Neanderthals and modern Homo sapiens skulls. Now, Meki, I'm going to keep it on the screen, and you can read us through this.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, you can see now a head-on comparison between the Neanderthal and the Homo sapiens skull. Now, the Neanderthals were larger than us. They also had larger brains, believe it or not. In fact, significantly larger brains. The Neanderthal, which is on the right in the image, had a sloping forehead, larger brow ridge, larger nasal opening, larger around the eye socket with a weaker and less pronounced chin, and a slightly elongated appearing skull. That aspect will be revisited in this thread. Might not be part of this discussion, but you can find it yourself, of course. While on the left, of course, we have modern Homo sapien. The question that arises is if Homo sapiens interbred with the Neanderthal, or Denisovian for the matter, then diluted their lines out of existence, then would we find some residual evidence in present-day groups of people who may have shown signs or remnants of both skull types? Have we seen such a group of people in our recent past? When many think of modern man's history, we look back at all our great accomplishments. We feel supreme and feel that we have conquered the planet, which for all purposes we have, causing a lot of damage along the way. There have been two things we have carried with us along the way. One is religion, attempting a greater spiritual connection with our individually perceived creator, ourselves, and the world around us. Secondly, science, attempting a greater understanding of who we are, where we came from, and how the world around us works. Okay, that's all we have from this thread, this one here.
Now we have a quick comparison of two ancient sites, and this is...
That's, yeah, we probably have to put the pictures up for that.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. So why don't you talk us through it?
Okay, so this is the comparisons between Göbekli Tepe and the Manajra temple on Malta. And if you can see, the construction is very similar. They're sort of circular and quite natural in their form, not too many sharp corners, if you will, as seen from above. But they have antechambers and main chambers and then protective walls all around. On the island of Malta, we find many rather interesting structures. Here again, we find a paradox. Some of the sites on Malta show several types of construction. For example, on the one hand, we find very large, huge, rough-cut megalithic stones, similar to the ones we find all over Europe, next to what appears to be well thought-out cut blocks and slab stones similar to dolmens found elsewhere. And on Malta, there's actually like a T-shaped structure here.
Just like Göbekli Tepe.
Just like exactly. Exactly. And in fact, that's the question here. Anybody else notice the first picture posted above from Malta? It and the surrounding stones are very reminiscent of Göbekli Tepe, in fact. Elsewhere, again, we find smooth cut and placed giant stone slabs very similar to those dolmens found all over Europe, the UK, etc. Okay, and there we go. Now that we've compared the two, this is really like just as an example here. The question now arises: how strong would a Neanderthal be compared to a human? Well, for starters, massive broad shoulders are indicated by a scapular breadth that is about 8% larger than the modern human contemporaries. Neanderthals and autonomically modern humans did live side by side for several millennia. Second, muscle attachments for the pecs were enormous, up to twice the size of today's average person. Neanderthals had shorter, wider humeral upper arms, which combined with the shoulders suggests substantial rotator cuff muscularity, so you wouldn't win an arm wrestle with it.
Oh no.
And get this, the bones in their forearms were actually bowed from muscles that must have powered a grip that could crush stone. All of this upper body musculature was anchored on a solid foundation of massive quads that specialized in explosive power and side-to-side movement. This would have made Neanderthal figures in times upwards twice the strength of modern humans. Lumley, Woodyear, 1973. Yeah, and Neanderthals were pretty better at throwing than their modern contemporaries, Debenath and Turnpish, 1992. Dave?
Would a possible crossbred hybrid period result in a people who were strong enough to drag huge multi-ton megalithic blocks of stone and have the mental capacity to engineer some of the more elaborate sites? Many of the earliest megalithic sites contained such massive stones that we, in the modern world, would struggle with the idea of cutting, moving, and placing such monstrously sized stones when we think about how primitive they were supposed to have been at the time. Wow, that's a really good thought, Meki. We've only got 5 minutes left, right? So let me just have a look. No, I think we do the rest of Baalbek next week.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
So it's a really interesting concept, though, knowing that a chimp who's smaller than us, a chimpanzee, is stronger than us.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And thinking about if a Neanderthal was standing next to us now and they were bigger and stronger, how immensely stronger they would be, and possibly more capable of building the megalithic structures than we would be. It's really shaken my foundations, making mind the pun, to consider that.
Yeah.
But a hybrid, I suppose, on the other hand, you'd have to get the right hybridization. You might just get a taller, weaker version in your many experiments, rather than a smarter and bigger version of us. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So would you be lucky to get the traits just perfect enough and in quantity enough to be able to make them? But who's to say? If only I had a time machine not strong enough to be able to go back in time and have a look to see what was really the truth.
Oh, that would be fascinating. But look, it's certainly a very provocative kind of thought. I mean, because the thing is this, we do have to consider the other races, right? And the potential physical strength that they had. And like I said, what we have today is just a small fraction of the human races that would have existed at the time of the last ice age, right? And those last ice age civilizations would they have been founded by Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo sapiens separately? Looking at how we seem to congregate amongst ourselves these days, I would say probably there would have been commerce or traffic between them, just like there's today. But I think there would have been distinct civilizations here, like at least 3, maybe 4 or 5, who knows, right? Mm-hmm. That maybe at different levels of technological advancement and achievement, and quite possibly at war with each other at certain times, right? Just like we are today. There's no reason to assume that human beings would ever have acted differently to what we act today, right? At large, anyway. So I think a lot of the ancient stories of the conflict between the gods and different types of humans and all these wonderful things with giants, etc., I think are very much based on fact. Okay, and if you throw in the interventionism theories in, I think we can take it even further. And then, how do Sasquatch and Yeti and all those guys fit in? Well, clearly, in my opinion, they are the original inhabitants of this planet before there was any interference. And I also get, in my mind at least, they have access to technology that we do not, or at least not actively. They probably have been around long enough and remember enough to use the gateways that they seem to be using, right? And I can only imagine what the world would have looked like 15, 16,000 years ago. I mean, it would have, honestly, I think anybody that would travel to that particular time and look around would just be blown away. Mm-hmm. I think it'd be a marvel to behold. I really believe that.
Thinking of what was ground off at the soil, as far as megalithic structures concerned, by glaciation. Just got to imagine what that would have been like. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Look, I'm looking at the platform, especially in the
1
Baalbek,
minute or less.
And why would you need a platform like that? I mean, was it in fact to enable? This sounds crazy, but was it a landing platform for spacecraft takeoff? I mean, what required us to? That's it. Anyway, that's the music. Right?
I'm let's pretend the music's going because that's the way it is today. So you're going to catch Meki and I for 7 a.m. Eastern, US time, and for Plato's Cave, and yet again, back again next weekend for Shiny Side Out. And in the meantime, Meki, what do?
Be safe.
That's right. Thank you. Take care.